All right, welcome to another and probably long overdue episode of Mike's Big Marshall Folder Exploration Journey. In previous episodes, we took a look at some cold steel Voyagers, the large and the XL drop point and clip point, and the Voyager. And the Voyagers are among some of my favorite folding knives. I EDC and use them a lot. But in those reviews, I did get a number of comments that basically said, Mike, what about the Tanto? You've got to get the Tanto. You've got to review the Tanto. And I didn't have one. And there are reasons for that, and this is where I'm going to start disappointing you. But I finally figured I should get one and give it a try. Now, this was a couple of months before the big move and everything else that happened to me, so several months ago. And here's my admission. I got it and I tried it out for a bit and then pretty promptly dropped it in a drawer and honestly sort of forgot about it. Until recently, as I'm getting to my backlog of knives that I haven't reviewed yet, I figured it was high time I took it out, give it fair use testing, and put it through my battery of impact, durability, and field use tests. And we are talking about the Plain Edge XL version. Now, one of the reasons why I didn't put it to a lot of use and sort of forgot about it for a while is probably down to my long-term inherent bias against the so-called American Tanto blade profile. So let's talk a little bit about that while we take a close look at the Voyager XL Plain Edge Tanto. Finally. All right, up front, Mike, what is your problem with this knife profile? And this applies to other American-style Tantos with this particular angular tip. And that, of course, includes a lot of cold steel designs. They were the front runner getting this design on the market. And I do get also comments, asking me to review other cold steel Tantos. And I'm very reluctant to invest my money in them. Why is that? Well, it comes down to two things. The edge geometry and the tip geometry. The edge geometry first. Okay, a lot of these do tend to come with hollow ground edges. And if you've been following my channel, you know I have encountered some hollow ground knives that have really impressed me with their cutting ability and even their chopping ability. But I have had also a lot of experience where hollow ground edges have just deeply disappointed me and not performed well at the kind of jobs I would like them to do. Also, I am not a fan of straighter blades. Now, those cold steel Tantos do have some curvature to them. And even this one that has a very straight back does have a little curvature in that edge. We'll take a look at it. But does this one have an edge geometry that is going to impress me or disappoint me? Well, we're going to find out. Well, let's talk about the tip, which means I have to straight up admit what is awesome about this tip. Can't deny it. Its ability to penetrate even the most insanely resistant media and not take damage doing it. And it makes an impressive hole in that media doing it. Can't deny that. But one of the things that I do have a problem with, maybe I'm just fearing the future, because this is my experience. If you happen to really love these, you probably also know one of the other awesome things about this geometry is this corner right here. It bites in fantastically when you are slashing. Can't deny that. Also makes a great slicing angle for fine cutting tasks. But again, fearing the future, this is my experience, that over time, with a lot of use and resharpening, a nice point like this very quickly becomes a not very nice, well, sort of lump like that, or even worse, if you really want to see what happens over several decades, it's going to completely disappear. So maybe this is just me fearing the future, and I need to get over it. Let's officially start with the friendly end, the folded in the pocket carry dimensions, and well, Your grip frame is identical to all the other Voyager XLs, but there is going to be some difference in the weight and the folded width front to back, because there's a difference in the blade width front to back. So I'm going to go ahead and make a couple of comparisons to the XL clip point. Now, quick note about construction. You've got Grivex scales with really aggressive diamond texture. I have had to specially smooth them out a little bit under the clip so they don't tear my pants to ribbons. Underneath those scales, you have full steel liners. You've got the triad locks, some jimping on the back. And with these triad locks, there's been some inconsistency out of the factory. But on this one, opening is very smooth, and yes, you can shake it open, and not a whole lot of grit in the lock either. So that's a bonus, at least for this one. But, okay, so length of these grips is 7 inches, 17.5 centimeters. Yes, I'm looking down at my notes to give you the metric as well as the imperial. Now, this is a bit narrower than something like the clip point. The clip point, front to back at the widest point, that's 2 1/4 inches, 5.5 centimeters, versus this one is more like 1 3/4 inches, about 4.5 centimeters, centimeter of difference basically in width front to back. But it does make it sit narrower in the pocket front to back, and that's also going to play a role when we get to Marshall handling in terms of grabbing the thing like this to use it as an impact tool and actually get my stubby fingers around this a lot better than something like that. So there's that. Thickness identical at 5/8 of an inch, 12 millimeters thick. Now, weight difference between the two. This was surprising. This is slimmer, but a shave heavier than the similar size clip point, 7.5 ounces, about 213 grams, whereas the Tanto probably has a bit more beef in the blade, 8 ounces, 227 grams, so half an ounce heavier, and that was a bit surprising. Before we talk about the blade, I have to talk about value for the money. The entire Voyager series, for what you're likely going to pay, I don't think you can find a better quality large folder, and this is no exception. Shop around because the prices flex a lot and frequently. I think on Amazon this is currently going for about $55, $56 US. We talked about the build of the friendly end, and if you've seen my previous Voyager videos, you know that this is an incredibly durable build, and in my hands very comfortable, plus it gives me a lot of different options for gripping it depending on my use and, well, what kind of blade reach I want. So that's all awesome for me. As for the blade, like the current iterations of the Voyagers across the board right now, you're getting AUS 10A that my test files are saying is somewhere slightly above a 60 HRC, which is great. Also has the same stone washed finish. Now, current iterations of the other Voyagers are different kinds of flat grinds. This is, as I mentioned, a hollow grind, and we're going to put it to the test and see if it's one that's going to disappoint me or impress me. But, all right. Not the crispest lines on the planet, but not bad at all either. A nice, smooth, flat transition to the back to get my thumb up, and yeah, I can choke way up here, get my index finger right to the base of the blade. No jimping on the back of the blade, but yeah, there's jimping on the back of the grip. Just a basic thumb stud opening. I could put a snaggletooth on it for pocket deployment, and yes, it does have enough blade mass. I will demonstrate you can shake it open. Now, identical specs versus, the ones that vary. Overall length of the XLs is 12 inches, 31 centimeters. Talked about the differences in weight. But blade length for the XL series, 5.5 inches, 13.5 centimeters. Thickness of stock, consistent with other Voyager XLs, 3 3/4 millimeters thick. And we'll see how it performs. But width, okay, there is a difference, but not as much as I thought there was going to be. Widest point at the base of the blade on the Tanto is 3 3/16 of an inch, or about 3 centimeters. Versus if I look at the wide belly of the clip point at its widest point, it's more like 1 3/8 inches, so about 3.75 centimeters, so about 3/4 of a centimeter in difference. It's not a lot, but it definitely makes a difference, not only in appearance, but as we talked about, when it's folded and handed in the pocket. And again, we'll see how it performs. So let me get to the point and roll in my, well, standard battery of use, impact, and durability tests. Voyager XL Tanto. Edge towards me. Yeah, that grip makes it awkward. Reverse grip. Pretty impressive. Straight into the redwood. Reverse grip. A few minor hot spots, but not bad at all. Voyager XL Tanto bamboo test. Really impressive bite. No edge damage. Showing some nice late afternoon shade for some idle stick carving. A little debarking. Oh yeah, it's very nice. How about taking off a knot? Oh yeah, there you go. That's pretty good. Let's go a little deeper. Bring it back this way. Yeah, pretty good, I'm gonna say. I'm not the biggest fan of these straighter edges, but it does have a bit of belly to it. Let's try it under some leverage here. Oh yeah. Okay. Pretty good tool. Well, not. Perfectly useful. Don't make a habit out of chopping with a folding knife, but you guys know I make the exception for cold steel triad lock folding knives. Let's see how it does against about 1 inch thick of ash. Oh boy. That's a nice bite. Oh yeah. I do not expect hollow ground blades to penetrate deeply. I do expect them to bite. This one definitely bites. In a good way. Now let's see how it batons. Wow. Nice clean cut. All right, we got to do the edge test. Now, this is absolutely not the out-of-the-box edge. I have been honestly putting this to use for a couple of weeks now, and it has already been through the impact durability field use battery. Haven't refreshed it at all. Also been doing some food prep with it. That's actually a good place to take advantage of that nice corner and the way that slices through things. Also really useful for penetrating those hard plastic, shell packages. But those are things that can, as I've learned, well, round off that tip and make me sad. So far not, but it hasn't been a long time. Cut up a lot of cardboard with it. That does not sound like a huge job until you realize, well, let's say I'm a self-admitted online shopping addict. And yeah, rest of my family kind of is too. So there's always a cardboard box or 2 or 6 on the doorstep. And I just got past the move, and no exaggeration, I purchased about 160 boxes for that, and we're still going through them. So that recycle bin is pretty much full to the top every other week when they pick it up. But, okay, without any refreshment, let's take a look at it on paper. Might have noticed a little tiny snag in the blade where it might have taken just a little tiny bit of damage, but yeah, it's really slicing. Cardboard, well, so I already did a lot of this, so I know how it's going to go, and it's going to go like butter. So how did it do? In the first set of tests, which I consider the most martial, thrusting and stabbing first into my Pell, which is multiple layers of thick cardboard backed up by a couple of inches compressed brown paper bag paper up against my redwood target. And then for extra impact and durability testing, I stab it directly into the redwood. It did exactly as expected. What this tip geometry does well is penetrate without me worrying about it getting damaged, makes an impressive channel into the softer target media, and hits really nicely into the harder target media. And my grip on the knife was great, except for, I mentioned this in other Voyager and also the Espada series knives, when these grips are very curved forward like this, Navaja style. Anytime I'm reversing the blade towards me, things get just kind of awkward and not very usable. With the edge facing away from me in the forward grip and the reverse grip, yeah, it was great. And yes, speaking of abusive, I did throw the thing. And it did okay. It's not really balanced for that, but I made it work, and I wasn't really worried about hurting the knife in doing it. Wouldn't make a habit out of it, but, you know, got through that. Speaking of got through it, bamboo test, hacking and slashing into a piece of hard bamboo to see if I can induce chip or roll on a fragile edge. And yeah, hollow ground edges do worry me a little bit more than other profiles. This one did just fine, but refer back to that little post-test paper cut. There may somewhere in there have been just the slightest microscopic roll in the edge. So there's just a little bit of a snag somewhere in the blade. Can't even see it though. I can feel it when I'm cutting, but I can't see it. But that might also have happened in some of the other tests. Now, I did some fine carving. I've been carving on a number of straight sticks in my spare time to make this old man some, you know, walking staffs and canes and things like that. And for fine carving, you know, it is kind of a big blade, but I can choke way up on it, and it does just fine. Nothing wrong with it. Yeah, I would like something with a little bit more belly, but this was a perfectly serviceable tool for fine carving. Then I went ahead and tried to chop into some branches, and yeah, this one actually did really well in terms of biting into that dry wood. Not worried about this build loosening up under those kinds of impacts from experience with cold steel triad knives, and this one, yeah, no exception. Nothing loosened up, and it felt just great. And when I'm chopping, that's a good opportunity for me to choke all the way down to get that momentum. And that is an awesome feature of the XLs. Then I went ahead and tried some batoning. I didn't expect it to do well, but it actually did. So I think I need to get over my bias. All right, now to the unflattering waistline view again and talk about carry and deployment. Like the other XL Voyagers, it's too long to fit in my back pocket, but lives perfectly comfortably in my front pocket, which is where I've been carrying my XL Voyagers, including this one for the last week or so. Does it feel significantly slimmer in pocket than some of the wider Voyagers? Actually, not really, but then I'm used to carrying those wider ones, so your mileage may vary. Now when it comes to visibility, I've got a black pocket clip, black grip, not a lot of exposed shiny bits to get people's attention. Also, from what is exposed, visibly speaking, it doesn't necessarily look like I have a huge monster tool in my pants. Okay, maybe that wasn't the best choice of words, but let's say I haven't noticed anybody staring at my bulges either. So I guess that's a good thing. But when it comes to deployment, all right, again, as I mentioned, I've got good real estate to grab a hold of it. I did smooth out the aggressive texture on the grip so it's not snagging and ripping up my pants, so I've got a reasonably good smooth deployment. Still not worried about it going anywhere accidentally. Now, could put a snaggle tooth on it for pocket deployment. See that, or I got to shift my grip to get to the thumb stud, or, as I mentioned, length and mass of this blade is especially good for me for shaking it open. And I'm not very good at shaking knives open, but this is the way I consistently deploy it, well, assuming nobody's looking at me. As always, before we get to the Marshall, I have to talk a little bit about the driving philosophy of the series based on the wise words of Jorge Prina, that the best Marshall knife for you, not only the one you have on you when you need it, and I hope you never need it for that, but perhaps it's the one that you use the most for the most things, so you're the most comfortable and familiar with it in general. But this is also useful for optics, that balance between martial and utility. Should you find yourself in a place with people who, shall we say, may be sensitive to other people having weapons on their person, and some of those people might indeed be law enforcement, definitely helpful in those moments to be able to justify your carry as a tool, not a weapon. And I'm definitely going to say that the appearance of this blade profile does tend to say weapon more than tool. But is it usable as a tool? Well, it's certainly proven itself, well, actually pretty darn good. Is it the best utility knife I have? Well, no, but it's performed actually better than expected. Again, I have to start getting over my bias. But speaking of my bias, that bias does not apply to martial application. So let's get into that. All right, straight up front, martially speaking, I cannot deny the effectiveness of this tip and what it is awesome at. Now, in Tanto Jutsu, I would use my blade in all four grip orientations, forward, reverse, edge away from me, edge towards me, but because of the curvature of this Navaja style grip, yeah, turning it around this way just doesn't feel quite right. In the forward grip, I can make it work that way to get that cutting action in the stabbing arc, but there's not much on the back to hit with. I might be able to get a little bit of bite out of the tip. Speaking of bite, rotate it back the other way. I can certainly use the corner that I'm always so worried about wearing down and making me sad over time. Even with my martial knives, when I do target practice, that happens. In biting in a slash or a snap cut. So it's almost like I got two different points on this knife that I can make really good use of. And this knife does have enough length and mass that I feel like I can get a good chopping snap cut. Certainly chopped really well into those branches. Better than expected. So that translates to martial use as well. Hitting, shall we say, certain things that are about the size and consistency of a dry branch. But, okay. Grip, very comfortable. I can get more blade reach by choking down. In what I'm going to consider the standard grip, this 5.5-inch blade becomes about a 6.5-inch blade. If I go all the way down, well, now I'm getting closer to 7 and change, and gives me more impact in those chopping, snapping actions. Maybe not as much tip control, though. What about reverse grip? Well, first we got to get there, and yeah, this is balanced about right there at the top of that finger groove, so I can get a really quick finger twirl out of it. Now, I don't recommend doing finger twirls, but I like them because they keep my blade facing in the same direction. They are not very secure and probably would result in a disaster if I lost my fine motor coordination to adrenaline, so it's a bad habit. Well, what about pinch flipping? All right, I've talked about this before. Curvature, it's kind of horn down here at the bottom of the Voyagers. For me and my stubby fingers, it does really get in the way of me doing a pinch flip. Which means if I want to be safer than a finger twirl, I'm probably going to need to default to transitioning the knife in two hands. Now again, curvature of the grip limiting me. If I turn the edge towards me to get the cutting action and the stabbing arc, it's pointing the knife just too far back towards me for comfort, and doesn't even feel very useful this way. Turning it edge away from me, okay, the magic comes back. I have a very powerful stab. I can again use that corner to accentuate the slash at different angles. And yeah, I still have enough of a tip that I could hook back into something effectively. So there's that. The Voyager grip is sturdy enough. I feel like I could use it as an impact tool. And speaking of impact tool, this one is narrow enough that even with my stubby fingers, I can grab it folded and use it as an impact tool this way. So I think it does have its advantages as a martial knife over some of the other Voyagers. but they also have things going for them. Actually, so far, I love them all, and I'm glad indeed I got this one. Am I going to get the smaller 4-inch one? Well, probably. Am I going to invest down the road in more? Well, some of those other Tanto style knives that you've recommended to me, yeah, I'm probably going to give them a shot. My budget's a little bit limited right now, so it's going to take some time. Got to pay off some medical bills and other expenses first. But I still do have a small pile of knives I have to do reviews on. I have some swords I have to get to. I have, well, quite a few tomahawks and hatchets lined up for you. Until then, thank you. Well, thank you for the recommendation on this, first off. But thank you, as always, for watching, liking, subscribing, adding to our conversation, not only in the comments, but in other forums. Follow my journey, putting up with my madness, and I do hope to see you back for, well, whatever I get to next.